Okay, let's dive in. We've got this fascinating set of sources here, all focused on, well, one of history's biggest stories, Rome's shift from this small, almost dusty village to a world-shaping empire.
Yeah, and it's striking how the sources frame it. One really interesting idea is that Rome wasn't just a city, it became this powerful concept.
A concept? How so?
Well, fueled by pretty incredible political maneuvering, this relentless military machine, and just raw, undeniable power. It was more than just territory.
Right. And what we're exploring today isn't just the maps changing, it's the change inside Rome. The sources really drive home that moving from republic to empire, well, it wasn't just a title change.
Oh, definitely not. It was this dramatic, messy saga, packed with ambition, betrayal, attempts at reform, and a lot of fierce resistance. Really, centuries of drama.
Exactly. So our goal here is to unpack these sources, figure out how this republic, which started with these ideals of civic virtue, kind of collapsed under its own weight. Its success, corruption, the strive for control.
Precisely. How those founding ideals just couldn't hold up under the strain of becoming an empire.
So we'll trace it all. The republic's origins, the pressures that stressed it, the big figures like Caesar and Augustus who changed everything, the huge social shifts happening, and where it all ended up. Let's get into it.
Okay, starting right at the beginning. The sources point to around 509 BCE. This is the big one. Kicking out the last king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus.
Not just changing leaders then.
No, it was a fundamental identity shift. They made this oath, basically. Never again would they live under a king.
And that led to res publica, the public thing.
Exactly. The state is a collective responsibility, run by elected officials, the Senate, citizen assemblies. A really radical idea for back then.
But the sources are quick to point out it wasn't some utopia of equality, right?
Not at all. Deeply hierarchical. You had this constant tension, sometimes outright conflict, between the elite families, the patricians, and the ordinary citizens, the plebeians.
Okay. And the government they set up, it sort of reflected that tension, this marvel of compromise, one source called it.
That's a good way to put it. You had the two consuls sharing power, but crucially, with short, limited terms.
Sure.
Just 1 year.
To stop anyone getting too powerful.
Exactly. Then the Senate, mostly elder statesmen, ex-magistrates. Initially, they didn't pass laws directly, but had immense influence, auctoritas, over policy, money.
And the people had a voice, too, through assemblies.
Citizen assemblies for voting on laws, electing those magistrates. It was a mix.
And they even planned for crises with a dictator.
Yeah, but very carefully. A temporary dictator, appointed only in dire emergencies and strictly limited just 6 months max.
It sounds on paper like they thought of everything to avoid tyranny.
You'd think so. But the sources stress that underneath all that structure, the fault lines were always there. Elite ambition versus what the people wanted, the army's needs versus citizens' rights, tradition bumping up against the need for change. These weren't minor issues. They were deep cracks waiting to widen.
And Rome's incredible success, its expansion, just put immense pressure on those cracks.
Absolutely. First Italy, then they started looking further afield.
Which leads us straight into the Punic Wars, right? Against Carthage.
The defining conflicts, yeah. 264 to 146 BCE, on and off. The sources love the dramatic bits, like Hannibal and his elephants crossing the Alps. Can you imagine?
Incredible image. And the result wasn't just winning, it was total domination.
Utterly. Carthage destroyed, population enslaved, land supposedly salted, though that salt part is debated by historians. But the point is, Rome was now the power in the Mediterranean. An empire in all but name, perhaps.
But that conquest had huge knock-on effects back home, didn't it? The sources seem very clear on this.
Crystal clear. All this new wealth pouring in, it mostly went to the top. The gap between the super rich and everyone else just grew enormously.
That changed society itself.
Profoundly. And think about the scale of slavery. Millions enslaved through conquest. They flooded Italy, undermining the small farmers who were the traditional backbone of the army and the republic.
So the army changes too.
Massively.
Yeah.
It starts shifting from, citizens doing their duty to a more professional force, and critically, loyalty starts shifting too.
Away from the state and towards the general.
Exactly. This is the rise of the generals phase.
Yeah.
Figures like Gaius Marius, later Sulla, late 2nd, early 1st century BCE, they didn't just win battles, they broke the rules.
How so? What rules?
They started recruiting soldiers directly, promising them land, rewards, things the state wasn't providing. So armies became loyal to them, personally.
That sounds dangerous.
It was.
Yeah.
And it led to the unthinkable. One source gives this chilling line: no one in history had dared bring legions into Rome. Sulla did it first. Others would follow.
He marched his own army on his own capital.
To seize power, yes, a fundamental taboo shattered. And the civil wars that followed Marius versus Sulla, and the ones after, they just proved the Republican system couldn't handle the pressures of empire. It was visibly cracking.
Which brings us inevitably to Julius Caesar, the man who embodies that breaking point for so many.
He really does. The sources paint him as this complex figure, brilliant general, amazing speaker, loved by the common people.
But terrifying to the old guard in the Senate.
Absolutely. And after conquering Gaul, making himself incredibly rich and powerful, with this battle-hardened, loyal army, he reaches the Rubicon River in 49 BCE.
The moment of truth.
The Senate basically ordered him to disband his army and come home alone to face his enemies.
Which he wasn't going to do.
He couldn't, really. It meant political oblivion, maybe worse. So he chose defiance, civil war. The sources give us that famous quote, supposedly, Alea iacta est, the die is cast.
And crossing that river, there was no going back.
Nope. His rise after that was meteoric. Defeated Pompey, his main rival, eventually had himself declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life.
But he did bring in reforms, didn't he? Things that were popular.
Oh, yes. Land for his veterans and the poor, sorting out the messy Roman calendar, which is basically the foundation of ours, and naming July after himself, of course. Some debt relief, too.
Popular with the people, maybe, but the Senate saw a king in waiting.
That's exactly how they saw it. His power, his popularity, it felt like the death knell of the republic they knew. And that fear led directly to the Ides of March.
March 15th, 44 BCE, the assassination.
In the theater of Pompeii, a group of senators, famously led by Brutus and Cassius, stabbed him 23 times. They genuinely thought they were saving the republic.
They were wrong.
Terribly wrong, as the sources make clear. It didn't restore anything. It just unleashed more chaos, more civil war.
A power vacuum. And who steps into that?
A whole cast of characters. Mainly Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, the Egyptian queen Cleopatra, who'd been Caesar's lover, and Caesar's young, clever, adopted heir Octavian.
And that fight basically determines the future, right? Ending at Actium.
The Battle of Actium, 31 BCE, a massive naval battle. Octavian crushed Antony and Cleopatra. Total victory. He was now the undisputed master of the Roman world.
But he doesn't declare himself king. This is the clever part the sources highlight.
Incredibly clever. In 27 BCE, he takes the name Augustus. And he performs this masterpiece of political theater. He announces he's restoring the republic.
Well, he wasn't really.
Not in any meaningful way. He kept all the power. As one source puts it so well, Augustus didn't abolish the Senate. He tamed it. He didn't declare himself king, but he ruled as an emperor in all but name.
So the facade remained, but the substance was gone.
Exactly. He kept the old offices, the titles, the Senate meetings. But they were all subordinate to him. He held the real power control of the armies, the treasury, the provinces.
And yet under his rule comes the Pax Romana, the Roman peace.
Ironically, yes. This long period, roughly 200 years of relative peace and stability across this now vast empire.
A time of incredible building projects too, wasn't it? Roads, aqueducts.
Massive infrastructure development, connecting the empire, bringing water to cities, building temples, theaters, and a cultural golden age too. Poets like Virgil, Ovid, Horace writing masterpieces.
It sounds pretty good, that Pax Romana.
On the surface, maybe. But the sources remind us to look at the price. Real political participation, dead. Elections, just formalities. Yeah. The Senate, full of yes-men hoping for imperial favor.
And the people
kept content mostly with bread and circuses, free grain distributions, and spectacular, often brutal public games. But their political voice was effectively gone. The republic was a memory, replaced by autocracy. And we need to loop back to those social changes we touched on earlier because they were crucial in undermining the republic long before Augustus.
Right, the deep shifts happening by the last century BCE, like slavery.
The sheer scale of it. Some estimates, as you said, suggest up to 40% of Italy's population was enslaved by the 1st century BCE. That's staggering. It completely changed labor, society, even the military.
And then the wealth gap, just getting wider.
Wider than ever. This enormous gulf between a tiny, fabulously wealthy elite and the impoverished masses, many crammed into Rome itself. The city was huge, over 1 million people, but full of slums, prone to fires, disease, unrest.
So the old community bonds were fraying.
Definitely. People became less reliant on the state or traditional civic structures and more reliant on powerful individuals, patrons for survival, for protection, for advancement. This client-patron system became dominant.
Loyalty shifts again from the abstract republic to a concrete person who can help you.
Exactly. Whether it's a wealthy senator in the city or a general promising land after military service, the state was losing its grip on primary loyalty.
What about women in all this? The sources mention figures like Cornelia and Livia.
Yes. While formally excluded from holding office, elite women could wield considerable influence behind the scenes through family networks, marriage alliances, managing estates, advising husbands and sons. Cornelia, mother of the reforming Gracchi brothers, was revered for her virtue and intellect. Livia, Augustus's wife, was a key political player for decades.
And citizenship itself was a battleground.
A huge one. Rome was slow and often reluctant to grant citizenship to its loyal Italian allies, who fought in its armies for centuries. This led to the brutal social war 91 to 88 BCE, where the allies literally fought Rome for equal rights.
Did they get them?
Eventually, yes, Rome was forced to concede, but only after terrible bloodshed. It showed the Republic struggling, failing, really, to adapt and integrate even its closest partners peacefully.
So when you pull all these threads together, the political system being bypassed, the army transforming, the social fabric tearing, these powerful individuals rising the sources offer some pretty stark lessons about Republican failure.
It's definitely a story of gradual erosion, not a sudden implosion. The norms, the unwritten rules, proved just as important, maybe more so than the formal laws, once those were consistently broken.
A whole thing started to unravel.
Right, and unchecked power, even if it starts with popular support like Caesar's or brings stability like Augustus's, tends towards tyranny. And the sources really warn about ignoring deep social and economic divisions. That inequality wasn't just unfair, it was destabilizing.
And the empire itself, even the peaceful part, came at a cost.
A huge cost. Endless wars on the frontiers to maintain and expand it, autocratic rule, silencing dissent.
Plus, that fascinating point the sources make, even the emperors weren't safe.
No, absolute power breeds fear and plots. It's incredible 9 of the first 12 emperors met violent ends. Assassinated, forced suicide, deposed. Being emperor was perhaps the most dangerous job in the world.
Now, these sources don't all sing from the same hymn sheet, do they? There are different takes on why this happened.
No, there's definitely debate. Some historians argue the Republic's fall was almost inevitable, that its structures were designed for a city-state and simply couldn't cope with ruling a vast, complex empire. It was destined to break under the strain.
While others see it more as a tragedy, a preventable one.
Exactly. They focus more on the choices of individuals, the specific moments where things could have gone differently, the missed opportunities for reform. They see it as a failure of leadership and ambition, overriding civic virtue.
And inevitably, reading this stuff makes you think about today, doesn't it? The sources raise that question of modern parallels.
They do. Without taking a stance, they prompt reflection. Do modern democracies face similar stresses? Can republican systems withstand the pressures of global power, economic inequality, social division?
It's quite a question. The sources call Rome's story both inspiring and chilling, a mirror for our own age.
It's a good summary. So wrapping up, what the sources show is this wasn't a sudden revolution, but a slow metamorphosis, as one puts it. The form sometimes stayed, but the substance changed from shared power to imperial control. But the legacy, of course, that persisted.
In law, language, buildings, ambition too.
And that final thought from the sources is powerful. What Rome left behind wasn't just ruins, it was a roadmap, a warning, and a dream. A reminder that civilizations rise and fall, often due to internal factors as much as external ones.
Makes you think about the fragility of it all, and maybe leaves us with a question the sources nudge us towards. Was it really inevitable? Could the Republic have been saved? Or maybe, how much did that changing nature of the army truly seal its fate? Definitely something to keep mulling over.